Hi, Summerlin Church. I want to thank you for joining us after the sermon, where we spent some time talking about in dialogue the message that Bart gave. Bart gave a wonderful message about the Spirit's work in our lives, and he's in the middle of a series, in particularly thinking about the way in which the Spirit guides us through hardship, especially in the midst of this global pandemic that we're experiencing. And there are wonderful insights that we wanted to sort of play on and draw out a little bit more following the sermon in a conversation style. This is something that David came up with a while ago, and he and I had talked with Bart for months about the idea of doing a podcast together because there's so much rich material that we could reflect on, and we thought it'd be fun to do that. Now that we're in this situation, with being isolated and social distancing, with Peter's incredible production skills, we have the opportunity to jump into that now. So if you haven't watched the message yet, I would encourage you to do so. Bart focuses on a particular text in Matthew and in Mark when Jesus goes into the wilderness. And in Matthew's gospel, it says that the Spirit guided Jesus into the wilderness. And in Mark's gospel, it says that Jesus drove him into the wilderness. And right now, we're kind of experiencing a time where some of us are being kind of guided gently through our days in isolation, and others of us are feeling like we're being driven pretty hard through challenge into the wilderness. So we thought we'd take some time and ask Bart some questions and just dialogue a little bit about the message. So thanks for joining us. Well, Bart, I want to thank you for taking the time to do this.
My pleasure.
I know it's additional work on top of the sermon. We've both seen you in settings like this and know that it's a sweet spot too. And so we'd be remiss not to take advantage of your willingness to do this.
It only took a pandemic to get me to try this thing out.
Exactly. We've been working hard for a while.
I've been very open-minded, open-hearted. This is all it took to get me here.
Well, your message was fabulous about the Spirit. I want to thank you for that, and I'd like to start off by thinking a little bit and playing off the metaphor of the pilgrimage and the Camino. I know you've talked about it several times. I've never thought about a pandemic or the experience that we're going through right now through the lens of a pilgrimage. I've never been on a pilgrimage myself. I've been on long hikes that have some elements, some themes, or like a marathon that might have some themes.
That would probably work.
But how can we think more about this pandemic in terms of the pilgrimage? Like, how are your days different when you were on that road? Did you wake up and have an intention for the day? Did you think, well, I need to only take one day at a time? And can we apply some of those visuals and images in this time now, do you think?
Yeah, that's a great question. The fun thing about this is I don't know the questions you're going to ask, which I like. It's good. I like this conversational part of it. Well, the thing about a pilgrimage, I actually did a fair amount of study on it because I decided to do this one, and I, like you, had never done anything like that. Interestingly, just a side note, pilgrimage is growing all over the world. While church attendance is diminishing, pilgrimages are packed. So I think there's something to that. But one of the key elements of a pilgrimage is that you leave where you are comfortable. I mean, literally, you walk out the door. I mean, I met a woman on the Camino. It's called the Camino de Santiago, which is St. James Way. I met a woman who she had hiked probably 400 miles, and we were hiking together for a short time. French woman, and I said, "Where did you start?" And we were in western Spain by this time, and she said, "I started at my front door." I said, what? And she said, "I live in Paris. I literally walked out of my house with my pack on." Well, I thought it was a wonderful image of what a pilgrimage is. You intentionally disturb your comfort. you're not forced out to do a pilgrimage. You make a choice. But it's a choice to intentionally put yourself in a situation where none of your old tricks work, because it's all new. I think this pandemic is like that, except we've been forced into it.
Right.
We're all outside our comfort zone, whether you are an entrepreneur, a business person, a teacher, whatever. We're all off balance. And part of a pilgrimage is to intentionally put yourself off balance in order to open yourself up to some things you might not have seen. So that's the first part of your question.
Our tendency is to want to just fight that.
Absolutely.
Right? Fight the discomfort, avoid it.
Absolutely.
Go watch Netflix or Facebook.
Absolutely.
But you can't actually do that in a real pilgrimage, right?
I don't think so. At least not on the one I was on. You can fight it for a while, but 37 days, 6-7 hours a day hiking over 3 mountain ranges. I mean, you've just got all this time to yourself, and with other pilgrims that are hiking along. But no, it would be hard to do all 500 miles and not be changed in some way. Maybe you could pull it off, but you wouldn't be there if that was. Now, some people take the Camino with no intention of it turning into a spiritual thing. They do it for the physical part and the challenge, which is fine. But everyone I talked to, literally every single person who started with that reason, they wound up on a spiritual path by the end.
Wow.
So there's something about dislocating ourselves from our control centers where we can manage and manipulate everything to cracking ourselves open a bit. So I'm a big fan of pilgrimage. I've had a lot of people say, I've been thinking about doing the Camino. And I always say, buy some hiking boots and a plane ticket and just go right now. Because you won't do it if you just talk about it. Just go. Just do it.
Wow.
Now, there's other ways to do it. That just happens to be one.
How did it change, would you say, your relationship with time? Or how was your relationship with time at least different during that pilgrimage?
Yeah.
And I ask that because we're all having to kind of reorient our relationship with time, or at least me just speak
we
for
all
myself.
are. You're right. Everybody is.
And that creates more experiences of boredom, and so how did that in boredom? Well, that's a whole other thing. That's probably worth talking about at some point. But how did you learn to embrace a new posture with time and?
Well, even the physicality of that kind of Camino helps you do that because you're literally living with a 22-pound pack on your back. And if you add water, it's 26 pounds, just a little detail. Water's awfully heavy. And you get up every morning, you get your coffee, and you get some little food, and then you start walking. And the next day, you get up and you do the same thing, and the next day the same thing, and the next day the same thing. It was an incredibly simplifying experience. I decided not to be on the internet at all, except with my wife. Every 2 or 3 days we would FaceTime, which was wonderful. But other than that, I didn't look at emails. I didn't do any of that. So it radically simplified your existence. I had 2 changes of clothes. I had my backpack. I had my water. I had my hiking mate, Art Kopicki from Seattle, and I did it together. And the fact that you got rid of all the clutter, all the stuff you're worried about in the regular life disappeared for 36 days, pretty much. And it gave you a sense of a different space of time. And so your point is a really good one. And one of my worries during this pandemic is that people will fight so hard to get back to normal.
Right.
And I'm thinking, get back to normal? Why would we want to do that? Don't you remember what normal was? I mean, normal was you were worried about this
race.
And you had 200 emails to answer and this and that and your stock went down and blah, blah. You want to go back to that normal? I don't. And a pilgrimage helps you do that. I think anything that disrupts your pattern has the opportunity of cracking open your heart, your mind, your thinking, to new possibilities. Like this one, I'm sure you've had this experience. I've talked to a lot of people going, what really counts in life? I mean, because you're facing the possibility of death for one thing, or the death of a so what in the face of death constitutes a real life? I mean, do I want to keep living the way I have been living? I'm 71 next month. And, this thing has made me think, okay, if I'm fit the actuarial tables and I don't die in the pandemic, I got another 13 years, according to the insurance folks, And I'm going, so do I want to keep everything the same as I've been doing for the last 10? One last thing I'll say on this one. I did have one insight about time on the Camino that had a drastic effect on my life when I returned. And that was, and this is the exact phrase, it was just an intuitional thought. I think it was guided by the Spirit. I don't really care how it came, it just came. And it was, I will never live without margins again. That was the exact thought, those exact words. I wrote it down, I was hiking. And I thought about my life like a page of paper. There was a famous book back in the 90s, I think, called Margins. And the guy used an analogy. If you write from this edge of the paper to that edge and single space, no spaces between the lines, you just got words, words, words. If you looked at really, if it's an awesome essay, but it's written like that, you won't even want to pick it up and read it because it's all jammed. But you put a margin on the left and a margin on the right, and all of a sudden there's some spaciousness. So the thought was, I'll never live without margins again, which tells you I had been living without margins for a long time. And I have kept to that. It's been 7 years now. And I cut lots of things out of my life and created a lot of space. And I've filled some of that space in, but I've tried to be thoughtful and mindful about what I put back in those spacious places, or maybe take something else out. And so I have a different experience of time now than I did pre-Camino. Now, are there times when it's still kind of crazy? Sure. But in general, no. People say, oh, Bart, I know you're so busy. And I'm able to say for the first time in my whole life, that's actually not true. I'm busy. I'm delightfully busy. I'm not bored. But I'm not too busy, Now, don't all call me next week because I'm so unbusy, okay? Then I won't have any margins.
Yeah. I can relate. I mean, I can relate to I don't want to go back to normal in the sense of, it seems as though in the Spirit is all about change in a lot of ways.
Yes.
And we talked about repenting, and yet we're so conditioned against change in every way. I mean, we want homeostasis at all costs.
Absolutely.
And this goes from like a family system to a person who struggles to get over addiction, to change in that way, or to a nation, to
to a globe, to a whole world.
To a whole world. And so there's a cataclysmic event or something like this that causes some kind of disruption to the homeostasis. And then, like you said, we have an opportunity to adapt and create new things.
Right.
But we're going to be wanting to just go back, turn the air conditioner back down to 72 and get back to homeostasis or whatever.
It's a great analogy. That's exactly right. And if we do that as a globe, as a country, as a state, as a town, as a family, as an individual, we will have missed the greatest possible thing that's being offered to us in the midst of this terrible thing.
Redemptive opportunity.
Yeah, that's a great way to say it, a redemptive opportunity. We've got it. I hope that we take it at each one of those levels. But I think it's got to start with the individual. Like right now you see competing ideas for how to deal with this, and you hear competing, you see competing manners between people of different viewpoints. I'm hoping we can get past that, at least to some extent, and start thinking, how do we work together? I for one, am looking for some leadership that's going to pull us together, that's going to pull us forward, that's going to say, let's work as a team together on these things, even if we disagree on some of the hows to do it. Let's work together. So I think it's a tremendous opportunity to get out of homeostasis. That's a great way to say it. I just had this memory, and I can't remember where I read this. I can't remember where it was, but the thought was this: if if you really want things to be kind of quiet and comfortable, and pretty orderly all the time, planned out, you don't have to worry about any undue change sneaking in on you. There is a place, honestly, right now, there is a place you can find that. It's called a cemetery.
That's about it.
Yeah, and the contrast to that is a family with children the ages of your kids. How old are they?
14, 12, and 10.
Yeah, it's not orderly, is it?
No.
No, it's at best guided chaos, but it's alive.
Yeah.
It's alive.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's what I want us to be, is more alive in this time.
Oh, man. Can I say one thing?
Yeah.
Because I want the church to hear this, actually. In 1999, you were speaking at college briefing at Forest Home, and it had rained. It had poured down rain. I was there as a student.
Wow.
And it had pouring down rain, and there was like almost kind of a flood that went sort of through the camp.
Yeah.
And I remember you came in and you talked, and I think that we got a little break from the rain, and it was probably raining in the middle of your talk. And you said the Holy Spirit is like this rain and this river, and you said, I looked out and I saw it rushing through, and it was clearing out all of this debris and these rocks and sticks and other things, and it was as though it was kind of washed. Now it's disruptive for us, but it's cleansing in the same way. You've spoken a lot about the Holy Spirit over the years, and the disruptive, cleansing, healing work of the Spirit. Well, what do you think might be some kind of helpful parting words for the week to think about? What are some things that could be cleared out? What ought we be mindful about in terms of how do we pay attention to this disruptive work?
Well, that's a great memory, by the way. I remember that very precisely because it was practically a mudslide coming through the river down below the camp. We almost had to cancel the thing. Yeah, that was amazing. It wasn't just like a little bit of water in a stream. I mean, it was a big-time flood. And it was pouring rain when I gave that talk, and then it stopped for a little while, and then it thundered right at some key part of the talk, and I was able to make a good joke out of it. Well, I think the thing in the midst of this particular type of a sweeping, cleansing, pushing out the obstacles in our life sort of situation like the pandemic, I think the main thing, well, I'll just say the main thing that I can think of at this point is to become an observer, to observe what's happening rather than hunker down and try to keep the water at bay, to just almost go with the flow a little bit, and observe in your own life what are the tendencies that are being challenged, what are some of the thin places. You've mentioned that phrase in other times where God has sort of found a thin place in your life to break through, so that Paul says we're meant to, I think it's in 1 Corinthians or 2 Corinthians, he says that we're meant to be co-operators with God. We cooperate with him. Or he said it in Galatians, we keep step with the Spirit. So if you're trying to keep step with someone in a dance or something, you've got to observe it. And I would just hope that we can take some time and not just jam it full of meaningless fluff, and do some thoughtful reflection about our lives, about our communities, about our country, about our world. So become aware, basically. Take some time. And that takes time. Set aside some time. Maybe journal. Maybe you've never journaled. Just get a piece of paper out. You're not going to turn this into a class. Nobody's grading it. Just, what are some of your thoughts about your life? Sometimes having a pen in your hand helps, or sit at your computer. So I don't know. Become observant.
Yeah.
Don't let it go past you. and you're just the same as you were before. That would be a tragedy.
It's a great word, Bart. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Observant and curious in that as well, as you mentioned in the
curious.
sermon, being naturally curious.
Actually, I've thought
observing.
about if we turn this into a podcast, I came up with a phrase, David's sitting over there, that we might call it relentless curiosity.
Yes.
About self, others, and even God.
I love it.
Wouldn't that be fun?
I love it.
Relentless or restless curiosity.
I love curiosity and the idea of being curious because it takes judgment out. It's not
Yes.
about having an opinion.
Yes, that's good.
It's about learning and it's about understanding in order
Which
to
is
be
what the word disciple means. It means to be a
Learning.
student, which means you don't know everything. That's why you've got a teacher. You're open to learning.
I had when I was at the hospital for my CPE, our chaplain internship, Oliver Lee was the director, and we called him Yoda, African-American man from Louisiana, wonderful, amazing guy. And I remember asking him, I was so young and nervous, and saying, hey, I don't want to go into these people's hospital rooms and assume they want to talk to me, what am I supposed to do? And he said, be naturally curious.
Oh,
Be
that's
naturally
beautiful.
curious.
That's beautiful.
And I thought that was great.
Well, there you
really
answered
honored
your
it.
own question. Yoda answered it for you.
Yeah.
That's what we should do this week, be naturally curious about everything.
Good word.
Bingo.
Well, thank you. Thank you for listening and for tuning in.